The wind on the ridgeline cut through Nathan Hale's jacket like a warning. Late autumn air tasted of iron and pine, sharp enough to sting the lungs, and far below, the river coiled through the valley like a dark, moving scar. He adjusted the strap of his worn pack and stepped off the trail, boots sinking into damp leaves. He wasn't looking for trouble that morning, only silence, but fate rarely cared what a man wanted. It had been 7 years since he'd left the army, 5 since the nightmares had stopped coming nightly. The quiet of the mountains was supposed to be his therapy, a long conversation with solitude. He kept a small cabin near the edge of the state park where cell signals died and the nearest neighbor lived 2 miles of dirt road away. He liked it that way. People meant questions, and Nathan had none he wanted to answer. Half a mile in, he heard it, the smallest sound, almost swallowed by the wind. A cry that didn't belong to the forest. At first, he thought it was an owl or maybe a fox kit separated from its den. But then came another sound, a rasping exhale, pain and defiance tangled in one breath. He froze, head tilted, instincts waking like old soldiers. He followed the noise through underbrush until he saw the snare, a steel jaw trap half buried in frost, teeth locked around a foreleg mottled with blood and mud. The animal attached to it was no fox. A young bobcat, lean and desperate, its spotted coat trembling with every shallow breath. Gold eyes flashed when Nathan stepped closer, the kind of eyes that didn't plead, they warned. "Easy," he murmured, dropping to one knee. The cat hissed, teeth bared, muscles jerking against the chain. Nathan studied the trap, a hunter's relic, illegal for years now. Someone had left it here carelessly, or maybe deliberately. The anger that flared in his chest surprised him with its old heat. He shrugged off his jacket, using it as a barrier. "I'm not your enemy, partner." His voice was calm, steady, the same tone he'd used on patrol when approaching wounded men. Slowly, he reached for the release spring. The bobcat's paw twitched, claws slicing through air inches from his wrist. The hiss turned to a hoarse growl. "Yeah," Nathan whispered. "I'd fight me too." He worked the mechanism patiently, fingers numb in the cold. When the trap finally sprang open, the cat jerked free, stumbling backward, leaving streaks of blood on snow-patched earth. Nathan didn't move. He let the animal decide. For a long moment, those golden eyes locked on him, wide and unblinking. Then the bobcat limped into the trees and vanished, its shadow melting with the forest. Nathan exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, as if the forest itself was listening. He found himself returning the next morning with gauze, antiseptic, and leftover chicken. Part of him called it foolish, the animal was long gone, but another part needed to be sure. Tracks led down by the creek, pressed faintly into the damp soil. He followed them until he saw a shape beneath a fallen cedar, the same cat, curled and shaking, the wound angry and swollen. He knelt a few feet away and set the food down. "It's not much," he said softly. The cat didn't move. He tore small pieces of meat and slid them closer with a stick. After minutes that felt like hours, the bobcat stretched its neck and ate. Each chew was cautious, mistrustful, but alive. Over the next week, Nathan came daily. He spoke little, only simple words in the same measured tone. The cat learned his scent, his rhythm. He named it Sable, after the dark streak across its back. By the 10th day, it no longer flinched when he approached. He cleaned the wound once, slow and careful. It licked his wrist after, more acknowledgement than affection. When winter thickened, Sable disappeared into the forest again. Nathan thought that was the end of it. But sometimes, when he stepped outside at dawn, he'd find paw prints near the porch or a tuft of fur caught on the railing. He told himself it was coincidence. Deep down, he hoped otherwise. Years passed quietly. Nathan's life settled into the rhythm of seasons, repairs, hunting, and letters from a sister he rarely answered. The loneliness was steady, almost comfortable. Yet every now and then, he'd glance toward the tree line and imagine gold eyes watching. He didn't speak of it to anyone. Some connections didn't need explanation. It was an early spring evening when the storm rolled in, black clouds muscling over the ridge faster than the forecast promised. Thunder cracked close enough to shake the windows. Nathan was mending a fence near the creek when the first lightning struck, splitting a pine in half with a sound like cannon fire. Rain followed instantly, heavy and blinding. He turned toward the cabin, boots sliding in the mud. That was when he heard the scream. Not thunder, human. He sprinted. 50 yards upstream, a jeep had skidded off the dirt road and slammed into the ravine, half submerged, headlights cutting through rain like panicked eyes. Nathan waded into the current, the icy water biting his legs. Inside the vehicle, a young woman pounded weakly against the window, trapped by a jammed seatbelt. "I've got you!" Nathan shouted, but the current was rising fast. He braced against the door, water climbing his chest. The lock resisted, then gave way. He dragged her free, gasping against the cold, guiding her toward the bank. The slope was steep, slick with clay. He dug his boots in, searching for grip, when his foot slid. The river seized him like a living thing, pulling him under. The world turned to white noise, water, mud, darkness. His hands clawed at nothing. The current slammed him against a rock, pain exploding along his ribs. He surfaced once, choking, saw the terrified woman on the bank reaching for him, and then the current tore him under again. For a heartbeat, he thought this was how it would end, quietly, swallowed by the same wilderness that had once healed him. Then something struck him from behind, not a log, not debris, movement. Sharp claws caught his sleeve. A weight surged beside him, powerful, deliberate. Through the churn of water, he glimpsed golden eyes. Sable. The cat's body pressed against his shoulder, swimming with fierce rhythm, guiding him toward the shallows. Nathan kicked weakly, half following, half dragged by instinct. His boots scraped rock, he coughed river water and reached solid ground. The Bobcat hauled itself up beside him, soaked, sides heaving, its gaze fixed on him as if demanding he stay awake. He lay there shaking, rain mingling with blood, watching the creature that should have vanished years ago. "You've got some timing," he rasped. Sable blinked once, slow and certain. By the time rescuers arrived, summoned by the woman's frantic call, the Bobcat was gone, leaving only muddy paw prints leading toward the woods. The paramedics called Nathan lucky. He said nothing. How could he explain that luck had claws and gold eyes? In the hospital, the young woman visited him once. She said she'd seen the animal drag him. No one believed her. Nathan only smiled. Sometimes the forest remembers its debts, he told her. When he was discharged, he returned home to find the world washed clean by rain. The air smelled of cedar and wet soil. Near the porch steps lay a small pile of river stones, arranged in a rough circle. At its center, a single feather rested, dark, striped, unmistakably marked by claw. Nathan sat on the porch till sunset, the horizon bleeding orange through the pines. He whispered, "Thank you." Somewhere beyond the tree line, something moved, soft, unseen, but listening. He never saw Sable again. But each dawn, before the mist lifted, he'd hear a cry echo from the ridge, not mournful, not wild, just alive. And every time he heard it, the world felt a little less empty. Spring slid into summer with quiet persistence. Grass filled the scars the flood had left, and the river calmed into a mirror that reflected clouds instead of chaos. Nathan's ribs healed slower than his memory. Nights were restless again, echoes of current, flashes of gold. The doctor called it trauma revisiting its host. Nathan called it gratitude that hurt to breathe. People in town spoke of the rescue for weeks. The woman, Claire Holloway, wrote to the local paper. Her story ran under the headline, "Veteran Saves Stranger in Storm Tragedy." The details were polite, stripped of impossibility. No mention of claws, or eyes that burned against lightning. Nathan didn't correct them. Some truths, he knew, were meant to live only where belief could stretch. He went back to the cabin, back to the smell of pine sap and wood smoke. The porch creaked under his boots in familiar rhythm. For a while he lived as before, mending fences, splitting logs, feeding the quiet with his breath. But something had shifted. Every rustle at dusk made his pulse rise, not with fear but with hope. One evening, he left a bowl of water by the steps. Just water, nothing more. The next morning it was empty, a faint paw print pressed into the damp soil beside it. Larger now. He smiled, the first real smile in months. Still watching, he murmured. By late summer, visitors began to come, journalists, hikers, a wildlife officer curious about the rumor of a large bobcat sighted near the valley. Nathan met them with polite distance. "Plenty of cats up here," he'd say. "They keep to themselves." It wasn't a lie, it was simply smaller than the truth. On the first day of September, the sky turned the color of copper. Fires had broken out 50 miles west, and dry wind carried their ghost smoke into the mountains. Nathan could smell it before sunrise, a bitterness on the air that made the birds go silent. He spent the morning packing essentials, papers, a few photos, his old knife. He'd lived through worse, but experience had taught him that fire respected neither courage nor nostalgia. By noon, the smoke thickened. Embers drifted like fevered snowflakes. He loaded his truck and prepared to drive down the valley road when he heard it again, that sound, low and urgent, not human. A growl laced with panic. He turned and saw her at the edge of the clearing, Sable. Her coat, darker now, shimmered with ash. Behind her, the forest flickered red. She paced, eyes locked on him, tail slashing the air. "What is it?" he asked, absurdly expecting an answer. The cat darted toward the tree lean, stopped, looked back. A call. A command. Nathan followed. They ran through choking haze, the sky bruised with flame. Heat clawed his skin, branches crackled overhead. Sable led him toward the old ridge trail, the one he'd rarely used since the rescue years ago. Halfway up, he heard another sound, crying. Human. Through the smoke he spotted a ranger jeep half buried in fallen branches. Inside, a man coughed violently, pinned by the steering column. Nathan's training took over. He tore at the door handle, but it was jammed. Fire hissed through dry grass creeping closer. "Hang on," he said, voice raw. Sable moved behind him, pacing, tail stiff. The cat leapt onto the hood, snarling toward the tree lean as if daring the fire itself to come closer. Nathan used the leverage to wedge his shoulder against the frame and heaved until metal screamed. The door gave way, he dragged the ranger free, both of them collapsing in the dirt. The man's face was pale beneath soot. "Can't walk," he rasped. Nathan looked to the ridge. The fire was climbing fast, a living wall. He could carry the ranger partway, but not far enough. Then Sable barked, not a growl, not a hiss, but a sharp, guttural cry. She bounded ahead toward a narrow cut between rocks Nathan hadn't noticed before. A hidden path. He hoisted the ranger over his shoulder and followed. The passage twisted upward, choked with smoke but mercifully shielded from flame. Every few yards, he saw flashes of Sable's tail ahead, guiding, waiting, moving again. When they finally reached the crest, cool air broke through. Below them, the valley burned in orange waves. Above, rain clouds gathered like mercy. Nathan laid the ranger down beneath a stone overhang. The man was trembling but conscious. "You're safe," Nathan said. He looked for Sable, but the ridge was empty. Only soot and silence. Rain began to fall, thin, hesitant drops that turned into steady sheets. The fire hissed and retreated. Nathan closed his eyes, exhaustion washing through him. "You did it again," he whispered to the unseen trees. 2 days later, recovery crews found them. The ranger survived, his leg shattered but spirit intact. He told the same story to every official who asked, the veteran who saved him, and the wildcat that led them out. Most nodded politely, assuming delirium. But when Nathan returned home, he found new prints in the mud, small ones this time, lighter, like those of a cub. He laughed softly, a sound edged with disbelief. "Starting a family now, huh?" Through autumn, life resumed its slow rhythm. Reporters called again, drawn by whispers of miracles in the fire zone. Nathan refused interviews. He spent his days restoring what the smoke had blackened, repainting the porch, planting new pines along the fence line. At night, he'd sit by the fire, journal open, trying to find words that matched what he felt. None did. Winter came early. The first snow arrived before Thanksgiving, laying the forest quiet under white. Nathan awoke one dawn to scratching at the door. When he opened it, no one was there, just a single feather, caught in drift, and paw prints leading toward the woods. Beside them, smaller prints trailed in perfect line. He followed for a while, boots crunching softly. The trail ended at the creek where he had once freed the trap years ago. The snare was gone long ago, swallowed by rust and roots. Only peace remained. Across the water, he saw movement, a dark shape slipping through the trees, another smaller one behind it. He raised a hand but didn't call out. Some goodbyes were meant to be silent. Back at the cabin, he built a fire and sat with his thoughts. He realized that saving the bobcat had never been charity, it had been recognition. Two wounded creatures learning that survival sometimes means trust. Years apart, they had traded mercy, each keeping the other alive in a different season. As evening fell, Nathan opened his notebook and wrote. "I used to think the wild owed me nothing. But maybe it remembers kindness the way we remember scars." He paused, listening. From somewhere deep in the forest came a familiar cry, low, steady, neither warning nor fear. It rolled through the valley, echoing against the snow. A promise. He smiled. Still watching. The fire snapped, sending sparks upward like stars escaping gravity. Nathan leaned back, letting the warmth soak into him. He thought of the soldier he'd been, the silence he'd carried, and the wildcat that had returned it with grace. Outside, snow continued to fall, soft as forgiveness. By dawn, the world was white again. Tracks crossed the yard once more, looping around the porch before vanishing into untouched powder. Nathan stepped outside barefoot, feeling the cold bite of reality and something else beneath it, peace that didn't need explanation. He whispered into the wind, "You can rest now." Somewhere beyond the ridge, an echo answered, not close, not far, but eternal. The sound drifted through the pines until it became indistinguishable from the wind itself, a reminder that not all bonds end with distance, and not all rescues happen once. Inside, on the table by the window, lay the feather he'd found after the storm years ago. It quivered slightly in the draft, catching the first light of morning. He smiled, closed his notebook, and whispered the final line. She saved my life twice. The first time from the river. The second from forgetting what it means to be alive. And for the first time in years, Nathan Hale laughed, a quiet, unguarded sound that filled the cabin like sunrise.